We moved into our new home on a gray, overcast morning. Kind of day where the clouds hang low and the air feels heavy with secret. My wife Sarah and I were excited for a fresh start in what seemed like the perfect neighborhood. A place where everyone smiled, lawns were immaculate, and children played without a care in the world. Our house was nestled at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, flanked by old oak trees that seemed to whisper among themselves. It had a charming facade, the kind of place you'd imagine retiring to. But as I stood there, boxes still piled in the driveway, I felt a strange unease tugging at my chest. "Look at this place," Sarah said, her voice tinged with awe. "It's like something out of a storybook." I nodded, forcing a smile, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Maybe it was just the newness of it all, the unfamiliar faces peering out from behind curtains as we unloaded our belongings. Or maybe it was something more sinister, lurking beneath the surface. As we settled in, my curiosity about the neighbors grew. At first, it was innocent enough. I found myself glancing out the window, watching them go about their daily routines. Elderly couple across the street who meticulously tended their garden, the young family next door with their boisterous kids, and the single man in the house at the end whose blinds were always drawn tight. They were just ordinary people living ordinary lives, or so it seemed. But there was something almost hypnotic about watching them. Something that drew me in, compelling me to observe. It started innocuously. Small glimpses as I sipped my morning coffee or pretended to adjust the blinds. Yet each stolen moment fueled a growing compulsion. "Do you think we're weird?" Sarah asked one evening as we sat on the couch, the television flickering unnoticed in the background. Her eyes were on me, expectant and searching. "Weird?" I repeated, unsure of where she was going. "For watching them," she said, a wry smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I mean, it's not like we're doing anything wrong, right? Everyone's a little curious." Her words were a comfort, a balm to the nagging guilt I hadn't realized had begun to fester. I laughed it off, brushing away the concern with a wave of my hand. "We're just curious," I agreed, the words tasting like a lie even as I spoke them. But the truth was, the more we watched, the more I felt a strange satisfaction, an almost primal thrill. And I knew Sarah felt it too. We began to learn their patterns, the times they left for work, the hours they returned home, when they went grocery shopping and when they turned out their lights. There was something exhilarating about piecing together the mosaic of their lives, like detectives solving an unspoken mystery. It was during these quiet observations that the first flickers of obsession began to smolder. I remember the night it truly took hold. Air was thick with the promise of rain, and I stood by the window, gazing into the dimly lit street. Sarah was beside me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "Look," she whispered, pointing toward the young family's house. Father was standing in the doorway, his silhouette outlined by the warm glow from within. He paused, glancing over his shoulder as if sensing our gaze. We both ducked instinctively, hearts racing. "He can't see us," I said, more to convince myself than her. But my voice betrayed a tinge of doubt, and in that moment I felt a strange exhilaration. A thrill that coursed through my veins, dangerous and electric. From then on, watching wasn't enough. We needed more. The boundaries of our curiosity were stretching, begging to be tested. What secrets lay hidden behind those walls? What stories did their homes conceal? Questions gnawed at me, insatiable and relentless. The line between harmless curiosity and dangerous obsession blurred, an invisible thread pulling us deeper into a world we had no business entering. It was just the beginning. But in my heart, I knew that what we were stepping into was not a harmless game. It was a descent into something dark, something that would soon consume us whole. It didn't take long for our curiosity to transform into something darker, something almost tangible that hung in the air between us. Our innocent peeks through the blinds became less about understanding our new neighbors, and more about feeding an insatiable hunger. One night, while the moon hung like a silent sentinel in the sky, Sarah approached me with a glint in her eye that I had never seen before. It was a look of mischief and daring, a look that mirrored the thrill I felt in my own chest. "I want to see more," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper as though the shadows might overhear our plan. "Don't you?" I hesitated for a moment, the rational part of my mind screaming that this was a bad idea. But the allure of uncovering hidden truths was too powerful, too tempting to resist. I nodded, feeling the pull of something dark and forbidden. "We should get closer," I said finally, the words escaping my lips before I could fully comprehend their implications. It started with small ventures out into the night. We would slip out the back door, our footsteps muffled by the damp grass, moving like specters through the darkness. The thrill of sneaking around was intoxicating, a heady mix of fear and excitement that quickened our pulse and sharpened our senses. Peering through the windows, we saw glimpses of lives unguarded. The elderly couple having dinner in their immaculate dining room, the young family laughing over a game of charades, and the solitary man scribbling away in a leather-bound notebook, oblivious to our presence. It was like watching scenes from a movie, each frame more tantalizing than the last. "We're not hurting anyone," Sarah reassured me as we crouched beneath a window ledge one chilly evening. Her breath was visible in the cool night air, curling like wisps of smoke. "It's just harmless curiosity." But deep down, we both knew that was a lie. A comforting delusion we clung to as we crossed boundaries that should never have been breached. There was a fine line between curiosity and invasion, and we were teetering precariously on the edge. One night, the allure became irresistible. We stood in front of the young family's house, shadows stretching across the lawn, and my heart thudded wildly in my chest. "I want to go inside," Sarah said suddenly, her eyes gleaming with excitement. A shiver ran down my spine, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The thought of crossing that final line was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. But Sarah's determination was infectious, and I found myself nodding, caught in the web of our shared obsession. We circled the house, checking doors and windows until we found an unlocked basement window. It was almost too easy, as if fate itself had conspired to lead us further down this dark path. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Sarah nodded, conspiratorial grin spreading across her face. "It'll be fun. We'll just take a quick look around." In that moment, standing on the precipice of our own self-destruction, I realized that there was no turning back. We were in too deep, our curiosity having morphed into an obsession that knew no bounds. We squeezed through the window, landing softly on the cold concrete floor of the basement. The air was thick with the scent of laundry detergent and mildew, a stark contrast to the adrenaline coursing through our veins. I reached for Sarah's hand, feeling the comforting warmth of her fingers intertwine with mine. Together we crept through the darkness, moving silently like phantoms in the night. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft ticking of a nearby clock. As we ascended the basement stairs, I felt a thrill of anticipation mingled with dread. This was uncharted territory, and the unknown loomed before us like a tantalizing abyss. We slipped into the living room, our footsteps silent on the plush carpet. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. I glanced around, taking in the familiar trappings of domestic life. Forgotten toy, an open book, a half-empty glass of wine. "We shouldn't be here," I whispered, the reality of our actions pressing down on me like a weight. Sarah shot me a defiant look, a mixture of excitement and challenge. "Just a few minutes. We'll be gone before they know it." But as we stood there, our hearts pounding in sync with the clock's rhythmic ticking, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a line we could never uncross. We were intruders in a world not our own, voyeurs in a private domain. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity as we lingered in the shadows, watching the family go about their evening routine. It was a surreal experience, observing lives so intimately yet remaining unseen. Then came the sound, a soft creak from above, the groan of an old house settling. It was enough to snap us back to reality. Curious thrill of our venture giving way to fear. "We need to go," I urged, a sense of urgency creeping into my voice. The thrill was waning, replaced by the stark realization of what we had done. Sarah nodded, a hint of reluctance in her eyes, and together we retreated, slipping back into the night as silently as we had come. The house loomed behind us, its secrets left untouched but not forgotten. As we made our way back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had unleashed something dark within ourselves. A beast that would not be easily tamed, a hunger that would not be easily sated. And as we lay in bed that night, the weight of our actions pressing down on me, I knew that this was only the beginning. Our curiosity had become an obsession, and our lives were forever changed. The following days were a blur of anticipation and restless energy. Each night, Sarah and I would lie in bed, our whispered conversations fueled by adrenaline and the lingering thrill of our nocturnal escapade. Our lives outside of those secretive hours felt dull and colorless, as if everything paled in comparison to the rush of peering into the forbidden lives of others. By day, we wore the masks of normalcy, smiling neighbors, polite conversations, mundane chores. But beneath that veneer, an unspoken agreement lay between us. We were partners in a dangerous dance, and the music had only just begun. It was Sarah who suggested our next venture. Her voice was a soft murmur in the dim light of our bedroom, conspiratorial whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "We should go back," she said, her eyes alight with a mixture of excitement and mischief. "But this time, let's take a closer look, really see what's going on." I hesitated, the rational part of my mind battling against the insatiable pull of curiosity. But in truth, the idea was too tempting to resist. The thought of entering the neighbor's world once more, of uncovering their secrets, was a siren call I couldn't ignore. "All right," I agreed finally, words slipping out like a forbidden promise. "Just one more time." We waited until the hour was late, world outside cloaked in silence and shadows. The neighborhood lay in peaceful slumber, unaware of the transgressions about to unfold. As we slipped out the back door, a thrill surged through me. Dangerous exhilaration that quickened my pulse and sharpened my senses. The young family's house loomed ahead, darkened windows like watchful eyes. We approached cautiously, hearts racing in unison with each silent step. It was almost as if the house itself knew we were coming, welcoming us into its hidden depth. Sarah reached for the back door handle, her fingers steady despite the tremor in my own hands. It swung open with a soft creak, a whisper of invitation into the unknown. "Let's be quick," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the pounding of my heart. We stepped inside, swallowed by the comforting embrace of shadows. The house was eerily quiet, a stillness that wrapped around us like a shroud. We moved through the rooms with a practiced ease, our eyes taking in every detail. Photographs on the walls, the knickknacks lining the shelves, the half-empty coffee cup left on the kitchen table. It was as though we were piecing together a puzzle, each element revealing a glimpse into the lives of those who lived here. In the living room, the television flickered faintly, casting ghostly shadows that danced along the walls. I found myself drawn to the soft glow, the familiar hum of static filling the air like a lullaby. "We should leave soon," I said, my voice breaking the spell. The thrill of our invasion was giving way to unease, a growing sense that we had overstayed our welcome. "Just a little longer," Sarah insisted, her gaze fixed on the hallway leading deeper into the house. There was a determination in her eyes, a hunger that mirrored my own. "I want to see more." Reluctantly, I followed her lead, our footsteps silent against the carpeted floor. We moved through the narrow corridor, the walls pressing in on either side as if urging us to turn back. But the lure of the unknown was too strong, pulling us forward into the heart of the home. We reached the bedroom door, its surface smooth and unyielding beneath my touch. I hesitated, a flicker of doubt creeping in. This was the boundary we had promised never to cross, a line that separated mere curiosity from something far more sinister. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, final plea for restraint. Sarah nodded, her expression unwavering. "I just want to see." With a quiet resolve, I pushed the door open, revealing the dimly lit room beyond. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and sleep, an intimate cocoon that enveloped us in silence. Family lay sleeping, unaware of the intruders in their midst. The parents were nestled together, their breaths a soft symphony of tranquility. In the corner, a crib cradled their child, a tiny figure swathed in blankets. A wave of guilt washed over me, a reminder of the boundaries we had so recklessly shattered. But alongside it came the undeniable thrill of discovery, the sense of being a silent witness to a life not our own. As we stood there, a noise from the hallway snapped me back to reality. Creaking floorboard, a ghostly echo of our presence. Panic surged through me, a cold knot of fear tightening in my chest. "We need to go," I urged, my voice low and urgent. The thrill had turned to dread, the specter of our actions looming large. Sarah hesitated for a heartbeat, her gaze lingering on the sleeping family. Then she nodded, and together we retreated, slipping back into the shadows as silently as we had come. The night air was a balm against my frayed nerves as we emerged from the house, cool breeze chasing away the remnants of fear. But even as we made our way back to our own home, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a line we could never uncross. Our curiosity had become a dangerous game, compulsion that demanded more with each passing night. As we lay in bed, the weight of our actions pressing down like a shroud, I knew that this was only the beginning. The thrill of the first break-in had been intoxicating, forbidden taste that lingered on my tongue. But beneath that exhilaration lay a dark truth, a hunger that would not be easily satisfied, descent into obsession that threatened to consume us both. We had crossed the line, and there was no turning back. Few days after our unsettling visit to the neighbor's home, I found myself at work, staring blankly at the computer screen. The words on the page blurred together, as if mocking my feeble attempts to focus. I couldn't shake the lingering images from that night. The sleeping family, the dimly lit room, the thrill and dread mingling in the shadows. The mundane rhythms of everyday life felt hollow, as if the world outside our nocturnal adventures had lost its luster. My thoughts were consumed by the anticipation of our next venture, a dangerous pull that overshadowed everything else. Sarah seemed to feel it too, the same restless energy coursing through her veins. Her eyes held a gleam of excitement, a shared secret that connected us in ways words could never express. Our obsession had become a bond, a silent pact that neither of us dared to break. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she turned to me with a look of determination. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "We should go further. Really dive in. We can learn so much more." I hesitated, the thrill of our last break-in still fresh in my mind. But there was a part of me, a darker part, that craved the same things she did. The idea of uncovering more secrets, peering deeper into the lives of others, was intoxicating. "What do you have in mind?" I asked, knowing that once we set down this path, there would be no turning back. Sarah leaned in, her eyes alive with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Let's go through their belongings, read their diaries, their letters, find out what they're really hiding." The suggestion was both thrilling and terrifying. Step into uncharted territory that promised new heights of discovery and danger. But the temptation was too strong, the allure of the unknown too irresistible. "All right," I agreed, the words tasting of forbidden fruit. "When do we start?" "Tonight," she replied, her voice laced with anticipation. "After they've gone to bed." As darkness fell, we prepared for our next venture with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The night air was thick with anticipation, each rustle of leaves and creak of floorboards amplifying the tension between us. We donned dark clothing, our faces hidden beneath hoods, becoming specters of the night once more. As we slipped out into the darkness, my heart pounded with a familiar rhythm, symphony of fear and exhilaration that drove us forward. The young family's house loomed ahead, an inviting enigma bathed in the glow of moonlight. We approached with practiced stealth, the shadows our allies as we moved silently across the lawn. This time, the door yielded without protest, swinging open as if welcoming us into its secrets. The house was silent, save for the soft ticking of a distant clock, a reminder of the hours slipping away, precious moments we had to explore. We entered the living room, the air tinged with the faint scent of lavender. Everything was as we had left it. Familiar tableau of domestic life unfolding before us. But tonight, we were not content to simply observe. Tonight, we would delve deeper. In the study, we found what we were looking for, a leather-bound diary, its pages filled with the intimate thoughts and musings of the family. Sarah leafed through it with reverence, her eyes scanning each page with rapt attention. As she read, I busied myself with the letters stacked neatly on the desk. They were a treasure trove of secrets, a glimpse into the hidden world behind the facade of everyday life. I felt a thrill as I discovered tidbits about their personal struggles, their hopes, their fears. It was as though we were peeling back layers of a meticulously crafted mask, revealing the raw, unfiltered humanity beneath. But as we delved deeper, a sense of unease began to creep in, a realization that we were treading on dangerous ground. Each revelation was a double-edged sword, drawing us further into a web of secrets that threatened to ensnare us. "We should stop," I said, my voice a whisper in the silence. The weight of our actions was beginning to bear down on me, a tangible presence that pressed against my chest. Sarah shook her head, her eyes still locked on the diary. "Just a little longer. There's so much more to learn." Her words were like a siren's call, tempting me to continue, despite the growing knot of fear in my gut. I glanced at the clock, ticking hands a stark reminder of the time slipping away. Then, from somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. The sound was like a gunshot in the stillness, jolting us both to attention. "We have to go," I urged, a sense of urgency creeping into my voice. The thrill of discovery had morphed into a primal fear, a reminder of the boundaries we had so recklessly crossed. Sarah hesitated, fingers lingering on the diary as though it held some irresistible power. But the noise from above echoed again, a chilling reminder of the family asleep just a floor away. Reluctantly, she nodded, and we retreated, leaving the house as quietly as we had entered. The night air was a balm against my frayed nerves, cool breeze chasing away the remnants of fear that clung to my skin. As we walked home in silence, the gravity of our actions settled in like an unwelcome guest. We had ventured further into the abyss, and the shadows we had uncovered were darker than we had ever imagined. Our obsession had become a beast of its own, a relentless hunger that would not be easily sated. And as I lay awake that night, staring into the void, I knew that the line between curiosity and madness blurred beyond recognition. We were trapped in a cycle of our own making, each step drawing us deeper into a world of secrets and shadows. The thrill of the hunt was intoxicating, but beneath it lay a chilling truth. Our lives were no longer our own. The descent had begun, and there was no going back. In the days that followed our deep dive into the neighbor's private world, I found myself teetering on the edge of a precipice, peering down into the dark abyss we had created. The thrill of our nighttime adventures was slowly being eclipsed by a gnawing sense of dread, growing awareness that our actions were spiraling out of control. Sarah, however, seemed unfazed. She moved through our home with a newfound energy, her eyes alight with an intensity that bordered on mania. The secrets we had unearthed had become a drug, and she was hopelessly addicted. Each revelation was a hit, feeding an insatiable hunger that threatened to consume her. "We need to be careful," I cautioned one evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, the shadows stretching long and sinister around us. "We're getting too close. It's only a matter of time before someone notices." Sarah brushed off my concerns with a dismissive wave of her hand, her gaze fixed on the stack of notes and letters we had collected. "Don't be such a coward. We're learning so much. We're in control." But were we? Or had we unleashed something beyond our understanding, a force that was slipping through our fingers like sand? Each night brought new risks, new thrills, and with them, a creeping sense that our grasp on reality was slipping. I began to see signs everywhere, little reminders of our transgressions that haunted me at every turn. Creak of a floorboard, the rustle of curtains, the distant hum of voices carried on the wind. They were ghosts of our own making, shadows that whispered our sins back to us. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I heard a soft tapping at the window, a gentle reminder of the world outside our obsession. My heart raced, cold knot of fear tightening in my chest. I approached the window cautiously, peering out into the night. There, beneath the streetlight, stood a figure cloaked in shadow. Their face was obscured, but I could feel their gaze locked onto me, silent witness to our clandestine deeds. I recoiled, the realization hitting me like a thunderclap. We were being watched. Panic surged through me, visceral reaction that set my nerves on edge. I called for Sarah, my voice cracking under the weight of fear. She joined me at the window, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she took in the scene. "There's someone out there," I whispered, my words barely audible above the pounding of my heart. "They know what we've done." Sarah's eyes narrowed, a flicker of defiance flashing across her features. "It's probably just someone passing by. We can't let fear control us. But the figure didn't move. They remained rooted in place, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of the night. It was as if they were waiting, biding their time until the moment was right to strike. Maybe we should stop, I suggested, my voice tinged with desperation. The thrill that had once been so alluring was now a sinister weight, pressing down on me with each passing moment. Sarah shook her head, determination etched into every line of her face. We're not done yet. We're so close to something big. Her words were a plea, a desperate attempt to cling to the excitement that had defined our lives for the past few weeks. But I could see the cracks forming, facade of control beginning to crumble. That night, I lay awake in bed, the shadows dancing across the ceiling like specters of our own making. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind, was a reminder of the darkness we had unleashed. In the stillness of the early hours, I heard a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. A soft, deliberate knocking at the front door. It was a sound that didn't belong, a chilling echo that reverberated through the house. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. The knocking continued, relentless and unyielding, a sinister rhythm that refused to be ignored. Fear gripped me, its icy fingers wrapping around my throat. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Sarah, who lay beside me, her eyes wide with apprehension. She nodded, her expression a mixture of fear and resolve. "We should see who it is." Every instinct screamed at me to stay hidden, to ignore the ominous summons that beckoned us. But some twisted curiosity, a remnant of our previous exploits, compelled us to move. Together, we crept down the hallway, floorboards groaning beneath our weight. The house was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the sliver of moonlight filtered through the windows. We reached the front door, the knocking now a steady drumbeat in the night. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, a sense of foreboding settling over me like a shroud. With a deep breath, I swung the door open, revealing the empty porch beyond. The street was deserted, the figure that had haunted my thoughts nowhere to be seen. But the sense of being watched lingered, a chilling presence that clung to the air like a second skin. "They're toying with us," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "They want us to know they're watching." The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Our obsession had drawn the attention of something or someone, far more dangerous than we had anticipated. We were no longer the hunters, the hunted. As we stood there, the night air wrapping around us like a cold embrace, I knew that the shadows we had courted were closing in. Our lives had become a dangerous game, a high-stakes dance with consequences we couldn't begin to fathom. The thrill of the hunt had turned into a nightmare, a waking horror that refused to let go. And as we closed the door, sealing ourselves back into the relative safety of our home, I understood one terrifying truth. We had unleashed something we could not control. The unraveling had begun, and there was no escaping the darkness we had invited into our lives. Following days were a haze of paranoia and sleepless nights. Knowledge that we were being watched had shattered the fragile illusion of control Sarah and I had clung to, leaving us on edge and fraying at the seams. Our lives were unraveling faster than we could have imagined. Each tick of the clock a reminder that the darkness we had invited into our lives was closing in. The thrill that once electrified our veins had curdled into a gnawing dread. Constant presence that stalked us like a shadow. Every time I left the house, I felt eyes on me. Piercing gaze that drilled into my skull. I scanned the faces of passers-by, searching for the slightest hint of recognition, telltale glimmer of a hunter among the herd. But they were all strangers, oblivious to the silent chaos that roiled beneath the surface of my skin. Sarah and I were prisoners in our own home, captives of our own making. We spoke in hushed tones, as though the walls themselves had ears, each whisper laced with a mix of fear and defiance. "We can't keep living like this," I confessed one evening, my voice barely a tremor in the thick silence that enveloped us. The weight of our deeds hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket, threatened to choke the life out of us. Sarah nodded, her face a mask of exhaustion and determination. "We need to find out who's watching us. We have to end this." The plan was simple, yet perilous. Venture out under the cover of night, blend into the shadows, and observe. It was a desperate gamble, A final roll of the dice in a game we had long since lost control of. As night descended, we prepared ourselves for the confrontation. Dressed in dark clothing, we slipped into the cool embrace of the evening, the world around us a tapestry of black and silver. Streets were silent, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves as we made our way toward the neighbor's house. Every step was a test of nerves, each shadow a potential threat lurking just beyond the edge of our vision. We took up our positions across the street, hidden in the inky recesses between houses. My heart pounded in my chest, a relentless drumbeat that echoed the turmoil in my mind. Minutes stretched into hours, a tense waiting game punctuated by the occasional flash of headlights or distant bark of a dog. But then, just as the night threatened to swallow us whole, I saw it, a figure emerging from the darkness, moving with a purpose that sent a chill down my spine. It was the same person I had seen beneath the streetlight days earlier, their silhouette obscured by the gloom. They approached the neighbor's house with eerie silence, phantom gliding through the night. My pulse quickened, a surge of adrenaline sharpening my senses as I focused intently on the stranger's movement. What were they planning? Were they the ones who had been watching us, tormenting us with their silent presence? Sarah tensed beside me, her breath shallow and ragged as we watched the figure pause at the edge of the property. I felt a spark of hope flare within me. Perhaps this was the moment we would finally uncover the truth, expose the specter that had haunted our lives. But that hope was short-lived. Without warning, the figure turned sharply, their heads snapping in our direction, as though sensing our presence. A thrill of terror shot through me, freezing me in place as I realized the depth of our mistake. I knew we were there. In an instant, the figure was upon us, a blur of motion that defied comprehension. I barely had time to react, comprehend the danger barreling toward us before they were standing before me, their features obscured by shadow. "You thought you could spy on us, did you?" The voice was low and mocking, a chilling melody that resonated with malice. "You thought you were safe?" My heart leapt into my throat, words failing me as I stared into the void where their eyes should have been. This was no ordinary person. There was an air of otherworldly menace about them, a darkness that defied reason. Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling with defiance. "We know what you've been doing. You're the one watching us." The figure laughed, sound that sliced through the night like a dagger. "You have no idea what you've unleashed. You've crossed a line you cannot uncross." Before I could comprehend their words, they lunged toward us, a sudden burst of motion that sent us sprawling. I hit the ground hard, pain exploding through my body as I struggled to regain my bearings. In the chaos, I saw Sarah fall, her eyes wide with terror as the figure loomed over her. The darkness closed in around us, suffocating shroud that threatened to snuff out all hope. Desperation surged within me, a primal urge to protect, fight back against the encroaching shadows. But as I scrambled to my feet, the world tilted, ground slipping away beneath me in a maelstrom of fear and confusion. I reached out for Sarah, my fingers brushing against her hand as the figure raised their arm, a glint of steel catching the moonlight. My heart seized, time grinding to a halt as the reality of our situation crashed down upon me. This was it. This was the end we had unwittingly invited upon ourselves, a tragic, inescapable fate that would leave no survivors. The last thing I saw was the glint of the blade, an arc of silver slicing through the air before the world dissolved into darkness. The days stretched on after that fateful night. The neighborhood, blanketed in a silence, bore witness to the horrors that had unfolded. The police arrived the next morning, responding to reports of screams that pierced the quiet night. They found the house empty, the signs of a struggle scattered throughout. No trace of the couple who had once lived there. Neighbors whispered of strange occurrences, of secrets buried deep within the walls of the homes that stood silent and somber under the sun's watchful gaze. And as the weeks turned to months, the mystery of what had transpired lingered, an unsolved enigma etched into the fabric of the neighborhood's history. Some said it was the work of a madman, a specter that had come to collect its due. Others spoke of forces beyond comprehension, a darkness that had claimed two souls who dared to tread where they did not belong. But one thing was certain: shadows held their secrets close, and the truth remained hidden, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurk just beyond the edge of curiosity. For in the depths of obsession, where boundaries blur and sanity slips away, there is a price to be paid, debt to the darkness that can never be undone. Hello everyone. Before we dive into the second terrifying story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to show your support. This video contains over an hour of chilling content created just for you. I'm thrilled that you're here to experience these terrifying stories with us. Your support means a lot to us and helps us continue to bring you more of these hair-raising stories. Now, let's jump into the second story. I've always loved photography, capturing the fleeting moments that most people miss. Living in Queens, New York offers endless opportunities for the perfect shot. But now I'm stuck in my apartment, my leg in a cast, cruel reminder of how one misstep can change everything. It happened during the golden hour. The light was just right, and I was perched precariously on a ledge, trying to capture the city's heart. I slipped. The pain was instant, searing. As I lay there, camera still in hand, I knew my chances for the contest and the prize money were shattered along with my leg. Days turned into weeks, and the boredom became unbearable. I've never been good at sitting still. My camera sat unused, mocking me from the corner of the room. That's when I found solace in my binoculars. From my window, I could see into the lives of my neighbors. It started innocently enough, a glimpse here, peek there, but soon became an obsession. Each window was a stage, each life a story. There was the young couple always arguing, the old man with his endless puzzles, and the lonely woman who sang to her cat. But one apartment drew my attention more than the others. It was directly across from mine, always shrouded in shadows. I first noticed the man when he moved in. All gaunt, with eyes that never seemed to rest. He had a way of moving that sent chills down my spine, like he was gliding instead of walking. I watched him at odd hours, saw strange visitors come and go. My curiosity turned into suspicion when I saw him late one night, carrying a large black bag out of his apartment. I remember the night vividly. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl. I adjusted the focus on my binoculars, heart pounding in my chest. The man was dragging the bag down the hallway, struggling with its weight. He stopped suddenly, looking around as if he sensed he was being watched. I ducked down, barely daring to breathe. When I looked again, he was gone, the bag with him. That's when I decided to document everything. My camera became my weapon. I photographed every suspicious movement, every eerie detail. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, no idea that my voyeuristic hobby would soon turn into a living nightmare. My days blurred into nights as I kept a close watch on the man across the street. His comings and goings were erratic, and the visitors he received were even more unsettling. They always arrived under the cover of darkness, their faces obscured by hoodies and hats. Each encounter left me with a gnawing sense of dread. It was around 3 a.m. when I saw something that made my blood run cold. I was drifting in and out of sleep, the binoculars slipping from my grasp, when I noticed a flicker of movement. There he was, standing perfectly still in the dim light of his apartment. His eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness, straight at me. I felt exposed, vulnerable. I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew I was watching him. My heart raced as I steadied my camera, the lens trained on him. I zoomed in, and that's when I saw it. A smear of what looked like blood on his sleeve. He raised his hand to his face, almost in slow motion, and wiped it away with a chilling nonchalance. My mind raced with possibilities, each more horrific than the last. Over the next few days, my paranoia grew. I started to notice things I hadn't before. Faint metallic smell wafting through my window, sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. I was too afraid of what I might miss. One night, as I lay in bed, the shadows in my room seemed to move, twisting and writhing like living things. The darkness played tricks on my mind, conjuring images of the man standing over me, his eyes cold and unfeeling. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering in my chest. I decided to confront my fears head-on. Gathering every ounce of courage, I set up my camera on a tripod, aimed directly at his window, and began recording. I watched the footage on my laptop, each second feeling like an eternity. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then I saw it, a brief flash of movement in the corner of the frame. Pausing the video, I zoomed in and enhanced the image. There, partially obscured by shadows, was a figure hunched over something on the floor. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what it was: a body. The figure moved methodically, wrapping the body in plastic with a disturbing precision. I knew I had to do something. The fear paralyzed me. Couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to call the police, but I was frozen in place, trapped by my own terror. The next day, as the sun struggled to pierce through the heavy clouds, I spotted him again. He was cleaning up, wiping down every surface with a meticulousness that only deepened my suspicion. I snapped a series of photos, each click of the shutter echoing in my silent apartment like a countdown to an inevitable confrontation. As I reviewed the photos, my hands trembled. There was no denying it now. I had captured something dark, something malevolent. The evidence was right in front of me, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in over my head, that I was meddling with forces far beyond my understanding. And then, the unthinkable happened. A sharp knock on my door jolted me from my thoughts. I peered through the peephole and saw 2 police officers standing in the hallway, their expressions grim. My stomach churned as I opened the door, a sense of impending doom washing over me. "Sir, we need to ask you a few questions," one of them said, his voice stern. My heart pounded as I invited them in, the weight of my suspicions crashing down on me like a tidal wave. This was it. There was no turning back now. Police officers' presence in my apartment made the walls close in on me. I tried to steady my breathing. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. They took a seat on my worn-out couch, cushions sighing under their weight. "We've had a report of suspicious activity," the taller officer said, his eyes scanning my cluttered living room. "A neighbor mentioned you've been taking photos of the building across the street." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "I can explain," I stammered, gesturing towards my camera and laptop. "I saw something terrible." The shorter officer raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "There's a man living across from me. I've been watching him for weeks. He's been acting strangely. I think he might have killed someone." Their expressions shifted from skeptical to intrigued. "Do you have any evidence?" the taller one asked. Without a word, I opened my laptop and played the video, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. Footage played, and the officers leaned in, their eyes narrowing as they watched the figure wrap the body in plastic. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of my laptop. As the video ended, officers exchanged glances. "This is serious," the shorter officer said, turning to me. "We need to take you down to the station for further questioning." Fear surged through me, but I nodded, knowing this was the only way to expose the truth. They helped me into the back of their car, pulled leather seat pressing against my cast. The drive to the station was a blur, my mind racing with a mix of fear and determination. At the station, they led me to a sterile interrogation room. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the walls. I sat across from the officers, feeling like a trapped animal. "We need you to tell us everything," taller officer said, his tone softer now. "Start from the beginning." I recounted every detail, from the moment I first noticed the man's strange behavior to the night I captured the incriminating footage. As I spoke, I could see their skepticism fading, replaced by a growing concern. When I finished, the shorter officer leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on me. "We're going to investigate this, but you need to stay here for now, for your own safety." I nodded, a sense of relief washing over me. They left the room, and I was alone with my thoughts. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an hour. The walls seemed to close in, and the air grew heavy with anticipation. Finally, the door creaked open, and the officers returned. Their expressions were grim. "We've dispatched a team to the building," the taller officer said. "We'll know more soon." I waited, my nerves fraying with each passing second. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Had I really uncovered a murder? Or was I deluding myself, my paranoia getting the better of me? The door opened again, and a detective entered, his face lined with worry. "We found something," he said, his voice low, "but it's worse than we thought." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" Detective hesitated, then spoke. "We found multiple bodies. The apartment was a graveyard." The room spun, and I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "So, I was right." "Yes," he said, his voice filled with a mix of sorrow and anger. "You were right, and you've helped us stop a monster." Relief and horror mingled in my chest. The nightmare was real, and I had played a part in ending it. But as the weight of the truth settled over me, I knew that this was only the beginning of a new kind of torment. The images I had seen, the darkness I had uncovered, would haunt me forever. The days following the discovery were a blur of police lights, hushed conversations, and sleepless nights. My apartment, once a haven of solitude, had become a constant reminder of the horrors I had unearthed. The police presence was constant, officers coming and going, their radios crackling with updates that did little to soothe my frayed nerves. I was under a sort of house arrest, not officially detained, definitely not free to leave. The detectives needed me close by, and I needed to know that the man across the street was truly behind bars. My paranoia was a living thing, feeding on every creak of the floorboards, every shadow that shifted in the corner of my vision. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows, there was a knock on my door. My heart leapt into my throat. Visits from the police were routine by now, but this knock felt different, more urgent. I opened the door to find Detective Carter, the lead investigator on the case, standing there. His face was a mask of grim determination. "We need to talk," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down my spine. I let him in, my anxiety palpable. He took a seat at my kitchen table, his eyes scanning the room before settling on me. "We've arrested your neighbor," he began, "but there's a problem." I felt the floor drop out from under me. "What kind of problem?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's claiming that you're involved," Carter said, his gaze unwavering. "He says you were his accomplice, that you helped him lure his victims." The accusation hit me like a punch to the gut. "That's insane," I blurted out. "I've never even spoken to him. I was just watching, documenting." Carter held up a hand to stop me. "I believe you," he said, "but we need to be thorough. There's enough circumstantial evidence to warrant further investigation. We found photos, similar to yours, in his apartment. He's trying to spin the narrative to save himself." My mind raced. The thought of being implicated in such heinous crimes, almost too much to bear. "What do I need to do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "You need to come down to the station," Carter said. "We need to get your official statement, and you might have to stay with us for a while, just until we can clear everything up." I nodded, my stomach churning. The ride to the station was silent, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. At the station, they took me to a small, windowless room. The walls seemed to close in, air heavy with tension. Carter sat across from me, a tape recorder on the table between us. "Start from the beginning," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Tell me everything." I recounted my story once more, every detail etched into my memory like a scar. The more I spoke, the more the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Carter listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking a clarifying question. When I finished, he switched off the recorder. "We're going to keep you here for the night," he said. "For your safety, we need to corroborate your story and see if there's anything we missed." The hours ticked by slowly, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional murmur of voices outside the door. I couldn't sleep, my mind replaying every moment, every image of the past few weeks. The faces of the victims haunted me, their eyes pleading for justice. In the early hours of the morning, Carter returned. His expression was softer, more sympathetic. "We've got enough to clear you," he said. "Your neighbor's claims didn't hold up under scrutiny. You're free to go." Relief washed over me, but it was tainted with a deep, abiding fear. As I stepped out of the station, first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon, I knew that my life would never be the same. The darkness I had glimpsed was a part of me now, a shadow that would follow me wherever I went. Returning to my apartment felt like walking into a crime scene. The once familiar space now felt alien, every shadow a reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. Police tape across the street was a stark, grim banner, bearing the end of a nightmare. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark still lingered. Media had picked up the story, turning our quiet street into a circus of flashing cameras and probing questions. Reporters camped outside, eager for a scoop, their presence an intrusive reminder of the grim reality that had unfolded. I kept my blinds drawn, my phone off, seeking solace in the isolation that had once driven me to voyeurism. Days turned into a blur as I tried to piece my life back together. The police had removed the evidence from my apartment, but the memories were indelible. Each creak of the floor, each whisper of wind against the window, sent jolts of anxiety through me. Sleep was a distant dream, my nights filled with the faces of the victims, their eyes hollow and accusing. One afternoon, as I sat in the dim light of my living room, Detective Carter paid me an unexpected visit. His face was etched with lines of exhaustion, but his eyes held a glimmer of resolution. "We got him," he said, taking a seat across from me. "Your neighbor confessed. His claims about you were a desperate attempt to shift the blame." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a heavy silence. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Now you try to move on," Carter said, his tone gentle but firm. "But it won't be easy. We have resources to help you. Therapists who specialize in trauma. I'd recommend you take advantage of them." I nodded, the reality of his words sinking in. Moving on seemed impossible. The weight of the past weeks a constant, oppressive presence. But I knew I had to try. The alternative was to let the darkness consume me, and I had already seen too much of that. As the days turned into weeks, I took tentative steps towards reclaiming my life. Therapy sessions became a regular part of my routine, the sterile office a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. Dr. Monroe, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes, guided me through the labyrinth of my trauma, helping me find words for the nightmares that haunted me. "You need to confront your fears," she said during one session, her voice steady. "Avoidance will only give them more power." Taking her advice to heart, I decided to face my apartment's haunting reminders head-on. I took down the heavy curtain, letting the sunlight flood in. The light was harsh at first, a glaring contrast to the darkness I had grown accustomed to. But it was also cleansing, burning away the shadows. I picked up my camera again, the weight of it both familiar and foreign. The first photos I took were tentative, but as the days passed I found a strange comfort in the act of capturing the world through a lens once more. It was a reminder that there was beauty amidst the horror, light amidst the darkness. One evening, as I reviewed the photos, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. In one of the frames taken from my window, I saw a reflection. A figure standing in the shadows of the alleyway below. My pulse quickened as I zoomed in, my mind racing with possibilities. But it was just a trick of the light, a distortion in the glass. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that the danger was over, that the man responsible was behind bars. Yet, the fear lingered, silent companion in the quiet moments. As I lay in bed that night, the familiar creaks of the apartment seemed less ominous, the shadows less threatening. I had faced the darkness and come out the other side. The trauma would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I closed my eyes, the faces of the victims fading into the recesses of my mind. They were at peace now, their stories told, and as I drifted into a restless sleep, I knew that I too would find peace. One day at a time, one photo at a time. Months passed, and life in Queens began to return to a semblance of normalcy. The media frenzy died down, and the neighbors resumed their daily routines, trying to forget the horrors that had lurked among us. But for me, forgetting was not an option. The memories were etched into my mind, as permanent as the scars on my leg. Therapy helped, but there were nights when the darkness crept back in, unbidden and unwelcome. I would wake in a cold sweat, heart racing, convinced that I could hear whispers in the shadows. Each time I would tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks, a lingering echo of the trauma. One particularly stormy night, as rain lashed against the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance, found myself unable to sleep. I reached for my camera, an old habit, and began snapping pictures of the storm through the glass. The lightning illuminated the city in stark, eerie flashes, casting long, jagged shadows. As I reviewed the photos, my breath caught in my throat. There, in the corner of one frame, was a figure. Tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of the light, but when I looked again, it was still there. A chill ran down my spine. I zoomed in, my hands trembling. The figure was standing in the alleyway, partially obscured by the shadows, but its eyes were unmistakable. They were the same eyes I had seen through my binoculars all those weeks ago. The eyes of a killer. Panic set in. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing. The police had assured me he was behind bars. This couldn't be real. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it was a figment of my imagination, a manifestation of my lingering fears. But deep down, I knew the truth. He had returned. My first instinct was to call Detective Carter. My fingers fumbled over the phone, dialing his number with a sense of urgency I hadn't felt since that fateful night. The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. I left a frantic message, my voice barely coherent, pleading for him to come. As I hung up, the power went out, plunging my apartment into darkness. The only light came from the occasional flash of lightning, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. I felt my way to the kitchen, grabbing a flashlight from the drawer, the beam cutting through the darkness in a thin, shaky line. I made my way to the window, my heart pounding. The alleyway was empty now, figure gone, but the sense of dread remained, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. I turned away, trying to convince myself it was all in my head, when I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible scraping sound coming from the hallway. I froze, every muscle in my body tensed. The sound grew louder, more insistent. I gripped the flashlight tighter, my mind racing through 1,000 scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. Slowly, I made my way to the door, the beam of the flashlight trembling as I reached for the handle. I froze, every muscle in my body tensed. The sound grew louder, more insistent. I gripped the flashlight tighter, my mind racing through 1,000 scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. Slowly, I made my way to the door, the beam of the flashlight trembling as I reached for the handle. The door creaked open, and I shone the light into the hallway, empty. But the sound persisted, coming from just around the corner. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped into the hall, the shadows closing in around me. I turned the corner and there he was, the man from across the street, standing at the end of the hallway, his eyes fixed on me with a cold, malevolent gaze. He took a step forward and I felt a scream rising in my throat, but no sound came out. I was paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, the hallway was flooded with light. I blinked, disoriented, as Detective Carter and a team of officers rushed past me, guns drawn. The man turned to flee, but it was too late. They tackled him to the ground, the scene unfolding in a chaotic blur of shouts and flashing lights. Carter approached me, his face stern but relieved. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice cutting through the fog of fear that had enveloped me. I nodded, unable to speak. The officers dragged the man away, his eyes never leaving mine. The look in them was one of pure, unadulterated hatred. But as the adrenaline began to fade, I felt something else, a sense of closure. Carter stayed with me that night, making sure I was safe, that the nightmare was truly over. As the dawn broke and the first light of morning filtered through the windows, I knew that while the darkness would always be a part of me, I had faced it and survived. The city outside was waking up, unaware of the horrors that had played out in the night. But for me, it was a new beginning, a chance to reclaim my life from the shadows that had tried to consume it. And as I picked up my camera, ready to capture the beauty of the new day, I knew that I was no longer a prisoner of my fears. I was free. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed these chilling stories as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up to keep the terror coming. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring even more spine-tingling content your way. Before you go, don't forget to check out the video playing on the screen. It's packed with more unsettling tales and eerie experiences that you won't want to miss. If you have any frightening stories of your own or suggestions for future content, drop them in the comments below. Stay tuned for more haunting adventures. Until next time, sleep tight, decamp.